The movie begins by showing us the inside of a house that we will return to later. The scene switches to an unseen man making changes to a vehicle's report at his home before he sits with the vehicle's potential buyer at the dealership. The main character is Mason, a businessman who really tries to sell the car. The man opposite him is concerned that the car is damaged, but Mason gives him the paperwork he fabricated to show the car is good. The next thing we see is Mason waving goodbye to the man he scammed as the man drives away in the damaged car. Mason occupies his boss's office. The boss complains about Mason having sold 2 broken vans last week to the city's disabled workforce. Due to this, the boss says he's being threatened with getting shut down. Mason has been making things hard for him. Defending himself, Mason says he can sell anything. That is what he is there for. However, the boss doesn't see any way out of this, so he lets Mason go. Afterward, Mason comes home to his wife, Allison, who is upset. She asks him what day it is and he doesn't know. It happens to be their anniversary. He tries to talk his way out of the mistake he made, yet his wife is very adept concerning his conning methods. He says he has a good excuse for his forgetting. The excuse is that he lost his job. Allison ridicules him for it, pretending to search for his job in the cabinet since he used the word lost. He asks if she still wants to go to a restaurant and she says she does. Once he goes outside, he realizes she's not behind him. He thinks she is kicking him out of the house. From the window, Allison says he can talk his way out of anything, so he will figure it out. She throws his clothes out before she rudely tells him to get off her property and out of her life. On the next day, he phones several people, but the talks don't go in his favor. What's worse is that he finds his phone battery is depleted. It prompts Mason to shoot profanities. As he walks, he finds a notice that salespeople are needed. Thus, he takes one of the phone numbers. The next scene has him sitting in someone's office alone until an elderly man enters to sit. He is Mr. Bent, asking Mason if he likes money. Mason asks if anyone has ever told him otherwise. Moving along, Bent asks him, what is his deepest fear? That is a question Mason would have to think about. Bent says his deepest fear is perishing alone. He adds a twist of humor by saying that is why he keeps a roll of money by his side. Mason tells him he sold everything throughout his career, and he is up for the challenge of selling anything Mr. Bent has to offer. The latter says he has some of the most difficult to sell properties in this state. A certain house has a history that turns people off. Bent offers Mason 35% of it. He doesn't want anything to do with the place, and wants it gone yesterday, not tomorrow. Since Bent gives the businessman the job, Mason says he could get started today. Prior to leaving, he finally tells his new boss his worst fear, failure. Mason arrives at the house. The first thing he does is place the for sale sign back on the post because it was lying on the ground. He enters the house to start getting a feel of what he will have to sell. He opens many doors until he opens the door to a bedroom. Mason sees a comfortable bed, which is exactly what he needs due to being thrown out of his house. Following this, he cleans the house and takes photos of it. As he does, he notices something behind him that we only see a small part of. He checks what it is to find nothing. Soon he looks at a part of the house with his phone camera. Strangely, he observes something in the phone, but not in reality. He also hears something fall in the kitchen and sees it as a knife. Once Mason gets in a bathtub full of water, the light turns off. Upon returning, we see hands moving behind the curtain. Moving along, Mason lies in bed, thinking of things to write that will help him sell the house. It doesn't take long for him to concoct the statement that the house is an idyllic abode that will remind one of what the good life is supposed to be. He continues that a house is more than a home. It is a place where people raise families, which is a connection that friendship is not a substitute for. When he is done saying this, he walks away from the mirror he was talking to. We see a grotesque figure in the mirror. While he is sleeping, the bedroom door opens. He notices a $100 bill lying on the floor. The lucky man collects it and shines his light in the hallway to see 2 more hundreds. Now he feels the need to yell who is there. Downstairs, Mason finds a suitcase full of $100 bills. Above it is a rope for hanging. He turns around to see many hands touching the glass on a door from behind. The grotesque figure stands up behind him, causing Mason to find himself on the floor near the bed in the morning. Scared, he looks at his phone to see he has a client. Suddenly his fear is replaced with excitement. Thus, the salesman puts on his business suit. He practices how he will be speaking to the client. As he does, he now finds 2 knives have fallen out from the cupboard. At this moment, a knock comes at the door, and Mason places the knives back in before he opens it. Seeing 2 people, he accidentally throws out profanity instead of giving a proper greeting. The woman is the client, whose name is Jean. The man is her agent, Ted. Once Mason lets them in, he tries to turn on the lights, but they don't cooperate. He attempts to cover the embarrassing moment by saying, electricity is not very needed with a home that lets in the amount of sunshine that this one does. He takes them to another room, where Jean seems impressed with a wood stove. It looks like Mason fabricates a lie on the spot, telling her it's from 1812. Following this, he starts to say the selling words he was glad to have created yesterday. Ted interrupts him by finding a chicken bone near the stove. It is another embarrassing moment the salesman tries to cover by saying it can be used for rotisserie. Jean doesn't seem impressed with what he is saying. Soon more chicken bones fall out. Mason deals with this by taking the duo to the kitchen. In there, he sees the cupboard being open and the 2 knives pointing out. After closing it, Mason takes them elsewhere to say they are going to have their wow moment. Yet the moment surprisingly includes many chairs barring off a door. Ted is curious to know if the chairs were always there. Mason lies that he put them there to remind himself to show the room on his way out. He wants to show them the master bedroom first. When they enter it, Mason expresses his love for the room. Of course, he got to sleep in it for free. What ruins the excitement is they hear a scratching sound that Jean thinks is coming from the closet. Mason hesitates to open it due to all the bad things that have happened so far. However, he opens it to find nothing unusual. Something bad does happen though. The door suddenly closes behind them. Mason has a hard time opening it. Once he does, they get startled by seeing several chairs near the doorway. The next thing we see is Jean and Ted running out of the house. The desperate salesman chases them, delivering the obnoxious statement that it is a smart home because the furniture knows at what time it should move itself. They don't listen to him and ride off. We see Mr. Bent about to eat donuts. Alas, a phone call from his new employee interrupts him from such a luxury. Mason asks him if something is going on at the house he was given to sell. He thinks someone is messing with him there. Bent bluntly says it sounds to him like what people call ghosts. Since Mason does not believe him, Bent replies it's an old house. He also says too many assassinations took place there, which is why it's hard to sell. It was another blunt statement. As he is walking in a store to pick out items, Mason tells himself there is no such thing as a haunted house. He returns there and searches for whoever might be hiding in the house. He doesn't find anyone. Moving forward, he ties the handles on the cupboard to prevent the knives from falling out. He also places a door stopper near the master bedroom door to keep it from shutting. Furthermore, he puts an open house sticker on the for sale sign. At night, he phones Allison, who greets him with an attitude. Mason says he just wanted to hear the sound of her voice. Therefore, she tells him to listen to how she yells profanity at him. He admits he made a lot of mistakes, but he has a new job. He is more determined than ever. She mentions his mother, and he says he kept her from being homeless. We learn his mom resides in a nursing home. Allison thinks he doesn't care who gets in trouble. What's important is that his ego does not get hurt. Trying to reply, Mason sees he got a message. He opens it to see a photo of the house's bedroom being covered in blood. Needless to say, this scares him. However, it does not stop him from responding to his wife. He asks her to forgive him and wants to continue building a life with her. Sadly, she tells him he sold her on a better life, yet it was an empty box. Inside the house, Mason looks at more of the photos that were sent to him. 2 of them show him lifeless people inside the house. He threatens to call the police to whomever sent the photos. He yells he knows someone is messing with him before he searches the house with a broomstick for a weapon. Not finding anyone again, he sits in a chair and hears the chilling sound of the nearby door creaking open. Since a voice comes from there, Mason walks toward the room. A woman's voice says she doesn't want to do something. She adds for someone not to make her go somewhere. Opening the door, Mason wonders if it's his mother. Soon he falls and discovers he's lying close to skeletal remains. This prompts him to scream in fear. He keeps screaming until he wakes up in a slightly different location with a few beer bottles. He enters another room to see more bottles on the floor. During such a messy time, Mason is shocked to look through the window to see possible clients looking at the house, so he cleans the mess and puts on his business suit. Afterward, he goes outside to greet them. The lady asks why would anyone give up such a nice house. Of course, Mason fabricates another lie, saying the current owners have a growing family, hence they are moving out. With that lie settled, the salesman takes the couple inside. They don't seem too excited in his presentation of the wood stove. He takes them to the bedroom, where he has to watch the couple get into an argument. The lady goes to the kitchen, and Mason joins her there. She says she likes the house because it is familiar. Once he starts talking about it, she starts to cry. The lady says that sometimes being married is hard. Sometimes she has certain fantasies that she does things to her husband before he can hurt her. She focuses on Mason, saying maybe he can help her. She asks if he can sneak her away to prevent things from getting very bad. Pressed against the wall, he says he's simply trying to sell the house. Thus she walks away, and he sees a knife in the back of her head. In a short time, he sees the couple standing eerily together with blood on them. They walk away irregularly. This results in Mason running out of the house in fear. At night, he sits in his car, searching the internet to learn a horrible event took place in the house. The couple he recently saw was involved in the event. On the next day, he enters a restaurant and sees a woman sitting there. He asks if she is Claire, but she does not answer. Mason sits at her table regardless. He asks if she's a psychic, to which she answers she's a medium. A psychic cannot do what she does, Claire adds. We see Mason has a hard time communicating with the medium due to her behaving oddly. Eventually, he gets around to telling her the house he's trying to sell has a dreadful history of claiming the life of anyone who moves into it. She wants to know how much he will pay her, only to learn he doesn't have money at the moment. He will pay her when he sells the house. Claire says if he pays attention and opens up to the ghosts, they will talk back. If he believes, he can even get them to leave. She agrees to help him. In the next scene, Mason returns to the house to start placing many crucifixes wherever he can. After he does some more cleaning, Claire arrives. She asks him what is with the crosses, and he answers he thought they were needed. They go to the bedroom, where the scratching sound returns. She doesn't see anything upon opening the closet. Yet she sees someone standing in the hallway behind Mason. He slowly turns around to see a shadowy man with white eyes. At this moment, the door starts to close and gets stopped by the door stopper. Mason takes joy in his small victory. At night, he lights the many candles he got for the master bedroom. Sitting at a table with Claire, he places garlic on it. She says it's not needed because garlic is for vampires. They put their hands on the table with closed eyes. Claire says she wants the spirit to speak to her. Once the table rattles, she says she is there to help. She tells the spirit to show itself. Hearing whispers, she tells Mason someone is present before the candles go out. It scares him to turn on the light. However, it doesn't help to remove the fear due to him seeing Claire sitting motionless. The door creaks open behind her and Mason goes to look into the dark hallway. He turns around to see Claire now standing with her head lowered as she points in the hallway's direction. Mason shines his phone light to see a scary woman standing at the end of it. He asks who she is, prompting Claire to whisper she is Scarlet. Mason tells Scarlet she has to leave, for it isn't her house anymore. He takes a photo of the ghost, and she appears closer to him. This scares him to the floor. Many objects shake prior to Scarlet going back into the hallway. Mason's phone flies out of his hand. With a different voice, Claire says, "We are many." Mason grabs the medium to tell her to snap out of it, and she does right after she punches him down. She says they have to go to the other bedroom. There, she says the first murders were in this room. The murders were of 2 girls by their father. Claire says everyone who lived in the house was made to suffer as they did. Scarlet was the last resident, and also the angriest. Claire says this house likes him. It knows he will feed it because he only cares about himself. Opposing this statement, Mason replies, it is nonsense. He claims to care about people. When he says he cares about selling the house, Claire turns around to roar at him. This sudden reaction frightens him to hide in another room. She tries to open it, making him yell for her to stop while he holds the handle. Soon she stops and tells him they are gone, but for a short time. She urges him to leave now. Opening the door, Mason sees her become possessed again. She chases him until she lets her run into a sharp broomstick. He did not mean to do it, yet he took the poor lady's life. Thus, he puts her in a body bag. In the morning, he drags the bag to the front door. He prepares himself to take the corpse outside and gets a knock on the door during such an awful moment. What's worse is that the knocker claims to be the police. Mason has no choice except to open the door. Thankfully, the person behind the door is none other than Mr. Bent. He says he is just joking with Mason. The latter instantly drags Claire's corpse into the nearby room so his boss does not see it. Bent enters the house, seeing the many crucifixes his employee has decorated it with. The lie Mason fabricates to explain the crosses is that they could attract a lot of people in this religious area. Following this, Bent is about to walk into a room, and Mason tries to stop him by saying there is a plumbing issue in there. Not listening to him, Bent opens the door to look at the state of the bathroom. Lucky for Mason, the boss doesn't see the blood in the bathtub. Entering the main bedroom, Bent is confused as to what happened due to all the candles there. Mason says buyers love a scent that takes them back in time. Changing the topic to an unpleasant one, Bent asks if Mason knows that every time more than one person is living in this house, one of them goes crazy and takes the lives of the others. He asks if Mason has seen any murders in the house, to which Mason nervously shakes his head. Before he leaves, Bent wants to look in the room that Claire's corpse occupies. But Mason stands in his way to say the room is fine. The boss is not an easy man to fool. He walks in regardless and instantly comments on it smelling like something became deceased in there. Seeing the body bag, Bent asks what is in it. Mason gives the best answer he can by saying it contains dirty laundry. Bent puts his hand on the zipper, yet decides not to open it. Mason is nothing short of relieved. After the boss leaves, Mason drives to the woods, where he buries the poor lady whose life was mistakenly taken by his doing. With that done, he cries in his car. He drives to his old house and sees Allison leaving it with another man. Although it troubles him, Mason doesn't do anything. At night, he returns to the house he's trying to sell. Inside, we see he has dialed 911. He cannot, however, get himself to call the number. He sees the paranormal rope hanging from the ceiling again, so he gets his head inside of it. Suddenly, Claire appears beside him, saying he has one more chance. Frightened, Mason awakens on the floor. He moves onward by collecting the crucifixes and the candles. He also cleans the blood in the bathtub, which he should have done much earlier. Soon he sees a man outside and heads over to him with the broomstick that Claire claimed. His mind is now warped because he tells the man to be gone. He even calls him a demon. Seeing that the man is not hostile, Mason asks to see the back of his head. The man is confused, but he does what Mason asks of him. He doesn't seem to be a butchered ghost to Mason. He is someone who wants to see the house. When they are inside the house, Mason is no longer trying to sell it, and he's not wearing his suit. He looks like a slob instead. The potential buyer says he read the house has a sordid history. Surprisingly, he actually likes it. Mason thinks he is joking, yet the man proves he isn't by saying he will buy the house. The salesman, who does not act like it anymore, is amazed to hear this. His happiness prompts him to hug the buyer, who reveals his name is Jim. Following this, Mason puts a sold sticker on the for sale sign. Once Jim leaves, Mason sees Claire standing behind the window, giving him the bird. The next scene has Mr. Bent giving him a check for over $60,000. He calls Mason his partner and says he has done the unthinkable. As a bonus, Bent gifts him with a lighter that has the word boss on it. He says he got the house in a poker game. What he didn't know is that the man he won it from lost the game on purpose. Bent says whoever owns the house owes it. Every time the house was hungry, he had nightmares he knew Mason had too. Since the house belongs to someone else now, Bent says that person will pass his ownership to another when he perishes. Hearing this troubles Mason. Finally, it seems like he returns home. His laptop shows him Claire has gone missing. Soon he gets a call from Jim, whose reason for calling is that he has an issue. Without hearing what it is, the man who used to be dishonest tells Jim he might need to do an exorcism. He advises Jim to get a priest due to mediums not being as effective. Jim says his daughter heard scratching in the walls. Mason is shocked he has a daughter, and learns she is merely 7. Switching to Jim, he is at his daughter's bedside. She says monsters are present, but he says they don't exist. In the meantime, Mason is driving to Jim's new house while attempting to phone him. Hearing a door creak, Jim turns around to observe the cupboard has opened with 3 knives lying on display. Afterward, Mason arrives at the house and rushes out of his car. He frantically tries to open the front door. Since he can't, he goes to another one to bang on. Jim opens it for Mason to run inside. He asks Jim if he is having trouble sleeping or any dangerous thoughts. The man notices he is holding a knife that he doesn't seem to be aware of. Once Mason asks where his daughter is, they hear her scream. This makes them run upstairs to her. Mason enters her room and she yells something is in the closet. Thus he turns to Jim, saying he wants to buy the house back. But Jim yells for Mason to get out of there. At this point, Mason says he wasn't being honest with him. He confesses he has bullied and cheated his clients his entire career. He has brushed the truth under the rug. Alas, the door between them closes during this crucial revelation. Claire crawls out of the closet toward the man who took her life. He says he never should have brought her there before he says he will inform all of her loved ones about what he did. Because of this, she lets him go. The door opens for Jim to reunite with his daughter. Mason tries to help them leave, only to be blocked by the couple he encountered earlier. He believes they can't hurt them, so he runs through the ghosts. When the trio gets to the front door, they see it's blocked by many chairs. They run to another door, and soon the girl yells out to her father. Mason goes back to see he has been claimed by Scarlett. She speaks through Jim as her puppet. She gets him to throw insults at Mason prior to imitating Mason's mom's voice. She frets about being put in a nursing home. She also says Mason left her to perish there. He admits he did that and adds he could have helped pay the mortgage to save her house. Instead, he helped sell it and he pocketed the cash. Furthermore, he says every bad thing that has ever been said about him is true. He apologizes for it. He holds up the boss lighter Bent gave him and says it will be him rather than them. Claire appears to drop a bottle of alcohol for the lighter to cause serious damage. Yet Mason decides not to burn the house. Once Scarlett lets go of Jim, Mason tells him where Claire's corpse is buried. He wants Jim to tell this to the police and also that Mason took her life. Following this, he looks at the hanging rope again and places its noose around his neck. He sees several shadowy people before he advances to the next stage. An unknown amount of time later, a real estate agent takes a couple to see the haunted house. As they walk inside, we see Mason has joined Claire in ghostly form. She asks him what he's going to do now. He guesses he has an eternity to watch the mistakes of others. He opens the cupboard doors that messed with him, forcing the people to turn around to see it. Mason and Claire each push a chair toward them, which scares the people out of the house. The new ghosts have become partners in the afterlife, working together to prevent anyone from buying this house.